Hi, I'm Jay Thomas, and welcome to Bald Tires, a proud member of the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. Today, we're picking up where we left off last week with Darren Labonte. This was part 2 of the podcast. If you missed the first part, I encourage you to go back and listen to part number 1, which is The Cat Came Back, episode 19 of Bald Tires. But today, this is called Go Out and Buy an Old Car. Darren and I get together to contrast and compare what it's like to drive an old car versus a new car. Some of our likes and dislikes with old versus new cars. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. This is Bald Tires, because when you make great memories, you make bald tires. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is supported by Connexus, savings, checking, GICs, budgets, RESPs, RRSPs, TFSAs, mutual funds, credit score, emergency funds, variable versus fixed rates, compound interest, retirement. The list goes on and on. It's time to make sense of it all. At Connexus Credit Union, they want to help. Financial literacy is a critical life skill, giving you the knowledge and confidence to make smart, responsible decisions about your money. Visit ConnexusMoneyTalk.ca to find expert advice, tips, and solutions for all life stages and events, and increase your financial literacy, knowledge, and confidence today. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is also supported by Direct West. Are you a business owner looking for new avenues to promote your business? Direct West's digital billboards are a great opportunity to highlight a new product, new promotion, or anything else you'd like your customers to know about. You can get local expert marketing help for your business at directwest.com. All right, let's pick things up with Darren. I know he's got a 2018 Chev truck, so let's find out what exactly he thinks of that. What do you think, Darren?
So far, it's been pretty good. It gets good mileage for being a pickup truck. Yeah. I don't expect it to get mileage like a Chevy Sprint does, but or did. But it's been a good truck. They're nice trucks. Out of the, I've driven all of the big name trucks. Yeah. And I feel like they're the most comfortable driving trucks out of all of them. And that, I'm trying not to be biased because I'm a Chevy guy, but I've driven Fords and I don't like the way they steer, and I've driven Dodges and I don't like the way they ride. And out of all the trucks, that Toyota is noisy. I find my uncle had a Tundra and I wasn't too impressed with it. I feel like they're probably lots of people would disagree, but I've always liked them. So, and I've had quite a few of them. So
you told me this last weekend, a Quadra-Steer.
I did, yeah.
That's really.
I miss that truck every time I got to park.
So for anybody who doesn't know what that is, for what generation? That was sort of what? So 2000
in 2001. Well, in 2001 they did the body redesign on the half tons, and they went kind of more round.
That was kind of the jelly bean look that it kind of became, right?
Yeah. And so in 2002. Was the first year for the Quadra-Steer, and it was available on the Denali trucks. So your truck was all-wheel drive and all-wheel steering. And the Denali trucks usually had the 6-liter engine, the bigger engine. Mm-hmm. Loaded truck for its age. For at that time, to get leather and power everything and air conditioning and a 6-pack CD player in the console. And all that was a loaded truck. The only thing it didn't have was a sunroof, and that was only because they weren't even available. Yep. So I had a 2003 I bought with 210,000 kilometers on it out of Calgary.
Which is quite a bit already.
It is, yeah. It was a lot already. I think I paid $5,000 for it, but it was very good condition. And the Quadra-Steer still worked because it was a very problematic system. And there was trucks that had problems in 50,000 kilometers. They were having issues with it not working. So I always made the joke that because it was a prairie truck, and all our roads are straight, the Quadra-Steer never had to work. It only worked half the amount of time a truck would anywhere else in the country. So, of course, it had way less hours on the Quadra-Steer than most trucks, right? But it worked right till the day that I sold the truck.
Really?
And I sold the truck it had 350,000 on it when I sold it. Wow. And I sold it for $4,000.
There's been some pretty harebrained stuff that I'm not saying just specifically Chevy. All the manufacturers have come out with.
Yeah. Well, Honda had a 4-wheel steer car too.
Oh yeah, ages ago. Yeah. The Prelude was 4-wheel steering in the 80s.
Was it the 80s?
86, 87, I think is when it actually came out. It was a success. It worked. They discontinued it a little while after that, but they actually brought it back more recently. In 2017, Acura brought out 4-wheel steering again. Yeah. It exists right now on Acura cars, which is really cool. You don't hear about it much, but it's out there. I was thinking, though, of some other kind of crazy stuff that's sort of come and gone, and for good reason. Like, I think of like Ford's, wow, they've all done it, power running boards that lower.
Yeah.
That's a bad idea where we live, you know?
It doesn't, the big problem with it is that it's just not durable.
Yeah.
It's just not. And if you live in California, they probably work for a million years. But you come up to a place like Canada.
Well,
I mean, they don't design anything for Canada.
No.
Everything's designed down in the States where the weather's good, and then they do their weather tests where they take it to somewhere and they put it outside in minus 40 weather, and then it starts. Well, good for the battery. You know, like, sure, any car with a brand new battery is likely going to start when it's minus 40, whether it's plugged in or not.
Well, and like a brand new set of power running boards works just fine in the cold for the first year or two anyways.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like, drive it down a gravel road.
Yeah.
For 100,000 kilometers. And don't put any mud flaps on it because nobody does.
Well, no. Why would you?
And then watch what happens when all that crud packs up into the mechanisms that lower those running boards. Another thing, I'm not going to pick on just one manufacturer. Dodge's automatic rear suspension leveling thing.
Yeah.
That does not work here. That's like getting deleted left, right, and center, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I got a friend of a friend who has this awesome Ram Rebel. Loves the truck. It's a cool truck, actually. It sounds great, but he had to there's a light on his dash that stays on now because he had those airbags taken out.
Yeah,
because that just freezes.
Yeah.
Like a little bit of moisture gets in there, but when you compress air, the byproduct is moisture. So naturally, it's gonna have moisture in it.
Yeah, and
freezes.
it freezes.
Doesn't work.
Yeah,
the ass hand hangs down. Like in the middle of winter, and your headlights are pointed up in the air, blinding everybody else who's coming on. Yeah, oncoming. Yeah. There's been some things that clearly, like, you're right. It's thought of in California works great.
Yeah. Well, and the new big thing on trucks now is tailgates.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Tailgates.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they're doing because it doesn't make any sense to me. A tailgate is a tailgate.
So,
but like the new whatever they call it, the pro tailgate that the GMs have.
So it basically has like a little section in the top that kind of flips down.
Yeah, like it's a tailgate that turns into a step.
When it's lowered, but then when the tailgate is up, there's sort of that center section that drops, and then it's kind of like a work surface. That's its idea. Is like you can put your notepad and write on it, but when you lower the whole tailgate, it's then a step.
Yeah,
it's all this stuff. And Dodge has got one that splits in half in the middle.
It's not even in the middle. It's it's like 60/40 or something like that.
Right.
But the GM one's funny because if you have your trailer hitch in the receiver, you could lower that tailgate right down onto that ball and damage the tailgate. Like
smash it.
You could damage it to the point that it might not close. If you have a trailer attached, you can't use that feature at all.
No.
Because the trailer's in the way. And the Dodge one, in theory, it's kind of cool because, like, the Ridgeline's, not that the Ridgeline is a real truck.
Nah, come on, it's a real truck.
They've had the tailgate that opens it both ways.
Yeah, that's right.
For a few years already.
15.
Yeah. But the Ridgeline is still a one-piece gate, and the Dodge is two pieces. And I know someone who has one.
Yep.
And it was a brand new truck at the time when I first saw it. And he said, I love it. He says, I can open it and I can reach almost, because it's a short bed truck, I can reach almost all the way to the front of the box because the tailgate, I'm not reaching over the length of the tailgate.
No, you're up against the bumper.
Yeah. But when he closed it, you got to close it the right way. It only closes one way. If you close it the wrong way, you'll damage paint.
It'll smash.
Well, it's like the old extended cab Chevy trucks where the back door opens suicide style.
Yes.
If you close that door, if you close the front door first and then try to close the back door,
it's going to smash on top of
the
it.
Paint.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful when you close it. But when it closed, the whole thing shook like it shook because it's two pieces.
Yeah.
It's not a solid tailgate. And they say it's supposed to hold like hundreds of pounds or whatever, like 500 pounds it's rated for, something like that. But I wonder what it'll be like after somebody drives down a gravel road for 100,000 K. That thing's going to be a rattly nightmare.
And you know that they put like 500-pound limit.
Yeah.
And somebody is going to park 1,000-pound quad on the back of that tailgate.
Yeah, of course.
And you hope to God it doesn't split in the middle.
Yeah.
That's what I envision. On it.
That's what I envision is it opening while the guy's driving down the highway at highway speed.
And it dumps.
And whatever is on it just dumps out onto the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know why they got to get I understand trucks are barely trucks anymore.
Yes.
They're like cars with I guess a box on the back. Some of them are so small, barely anything on them. Even my truck's got a small box on the back. But a truck is not a truck anymore. A half-ton truck
No.
is definitely not a truck anymore.
Well, and, I think of it this way, too. The big old classic car I have, the 69 Buick,
Yeah.
is kind of been replaced in society by a half ton. And follow my
much.
logic here. My car tows 5,000 pounds.
Yeah.
There was nothing that towed that much back in those days. A half ton did.
Yeah.
Except you didn't take a half ton on a road trip
Well,
because
no.
it had vinyl seats and nothing else inside of it.
Yeah.
And it was bare bones.
Well, and it only seated 3 people.
And it seated 3 people. Right? You couldn't take the family.
Yeah.
It was uncomfortable, rattly, rough suspension, drove like junk.
because it was a truck.
Because it was a truck.
Yeah.
And it did all those other things. It towed big loads. It hauled
Yeah.
stuff in the box. It went off-road. It did those things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, and one more thing. You could buy it for a reasonable price.
That too.
Because now, if you want to leave a dealership lot with something with 4-wheel drive, that's it. I mean, 4-wheel drive, it's $40,000.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
With nothing else on it. And
Yeah.
then if you
It's a
want
bare bones truck.
if you want a few things. So now we're talking most trucks are $70,000-$80,000.
And I laugh because I know that the cost of things goes up.
Sure.
But when you think about back in the day and when all the cool cars were built and everything was built by hand.
Yeah.
There was how many hundreds of workers in those plants? Mm-hmm. All making wages
Yeah.
and all doing that. And cars, everything's relative. People weren't making $100,000 a year. They were making $20,000 a year.
That's right.
I mean, everything's relative. I get that. But still, paying all those wages, all those benefits for those guys, all that stuff, the tools for those guys to use. And you go into a factory now, there's half or less of the workforce because so much is automated.
Completely.
And I know that those machines cost a lot of money. Automated machines are expensive. But you would think they're paying a lot less labor.
Yeah.
There's a lot less people getting hurt on the job. There's a lot less all that other stuff that goes along with having all those employees.
Hey, and you can run a machine 24/7.
Exactly.
It doesn't need breaks.
Yeah.
Coffee breaks. It doesn't
I know.
only work 8 hours a day.
But yet the cost of cars continues to climb at an unreal rate.
Yep.
When really, if you think about it, the cost to build them, after a while, that machinery gets paid off.
Yeah. It
Whereas
pays,
a worker never is.
no.
So that equipment gets paid off, and then really it's costing you a lot less to make that vehicle than it did before.
I know.
So I know that electronics and stuff are expensive, but we as a society we're making our vehicles so electronic,
Yes.
and so computerized that look what's happened with COVID. You can't buy a truck right now because they can't get the computer chips to finish building the trucks because there's so much electronic stuff on these new trucks.
Well, they don't run or function without them.
Well, that's the thing.
Right?
Like,
I mean,
at all.
it's not possible.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
I think it was in Mexico, maybe, one company, not a model that they sell in Canada or the US, but one brand was selling a car in Mexico, and they deleted the infotainment system.
Yeah.
So you could buy the car, and it had an old style little radio in it.
Yeah.
But there was like a pocket, like a cubby, where like the nice, 7.5-inch touchscreen should be.
Yeah.
Because they can't get the part, or they can't get the chips to make that part, but they can finish the rest of the car.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
I know
And
that-
so they're selling these cars at a discount or a lesser price.
Yeah.
'Cause it's just got an old radio in it.
Well, I was
you know?
reading a thing they were talking about. I was reading a little article about GM that GM was going to build trucks that didn't have their displacement on demand system, like the 4-cylinder, 8-cylinder mode
Right.
thing, because they can't get the chips to build the part of the truck to do that. So they were just going to make all the trucks a standard V8 truck.
run on 8
And
cylinders.
some of the comments I read on there was like, well, it's about time because they can't build one that the displacement on demand even works for more than 100,000 kilometers. So, like a lot of guys were like going to go out and buy a new truck that it didn't have that system purely because it didn't have that system.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of people out there that don't want all this crap that comes along with these new vehicles. Like my new truck is not, I guess it's a pretty loaded truck. It's a high country.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't buy it brand new. I couldn't have ever afforded to buy it brand new. But it has things like lane departure assist and things like that. Like I can actually, if I'm driving down the highway, I don't let go of the steering wheel completely, but I can let my hands hover over the steering wheel. And if there's a bend in the road, it'll turn.
Yeah, it'll follow it.
It'll follow it.
And it'll keep it in the middle of the lane.
It'll keep it somewhat in the middle. I don't need that. I know how to drive. I don't need backup sensors. I'm not going to say I don't need a backup camera. Backup cameras have one purpose on a pickup truck, in my opinion, and that's for when you're hooking up to a trailer. Because then it saves you getting out 8 times to make sure that you're, oh, I'm too far away. Okay, back. Oh, now I'm too close. Oh, now I'm too far away. Oh, now I'm too close. Oh, now I'm too far away. You know, it saves that. I can back up first time, hook up the trailer, and go. But 9 out of 10 features on a truck, most of the stuff you don't need. The average person doesn't need.
No, and it paints a really big, it becomes a really big discussion when you talk about all this stuff because it's moving the truck from a half ton into this luxury liner.
Yeah.
The price goes up, the features all go up. A lot of people still just want a basic half ton to do the work that it needs to do.
Yeah.
But there's always a competition, and it's not just because it's brand to brand, but it's the industry we've created that these businesses, these corporations, GM, Ford, Dodge, they'll close their doors if they stop selling trucks.
Yeah.
So then it's, what are we going to do to sell our trucks? What are we going to do to keep up with the competition? And it's a keeping up with the Joneses mentality.
Yeah.
So it's then, well, let's invent this crazy tailgate because it'll appeal to somebody.
Yeah.
When really, we don't need that tailgate.
No.
It's just a something to attract a buyer with.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with horsepower races. It's the same thing with towing capacity races. We now got half-ton trucks that tow 15,000 pounds.
Yeah.
You need a special license to tow 15,000 pounds.
Well, that's the thing.
Right?
And they can tow it, but can it stop it?
Well, okay, yeah, another discussion, sure.
Yeah.
But it's sort of a sad thing, the world we live in a kind of way that we're designing this stuff that we have to keep buying new. There's nothing wrong with the way things used to be. It's sort of a kind of a funny thing, and I struggle with it because I love cars, I love new stuff. Like I'm always interested in that sort of stuff, the new shiny thing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we do it for the sake of doing it. Sometimes.
I mean, I can appreciate.
Yeah.
Like, I can appreciate power windows and air conditioning and things like that. But when I get in one of my old cars, because none of them have any of that.
No.
I get in one of my old cars and I roll down the window and I go for a drive. It doesn't have cruise control.
Yeah.
Going out, I went to Rose Town for the car show here on the weekend, and about the third of the way there, my foot was getting a little achy from holding the throttle down. But we're spoiled now.
Yeah.
Like I used to drive that car, my Oldsmobile, because I took it to Rose Town. I used to drive that car. I drove that car from here home a few times.
To BC.
Yeah. Didn't even think anything of it. Jumped in it, window rolled down. Oh, if it's hot out, open a floor vent. And drove with no cruise control for 6 hours to Calgary.
Yep.
But that was my first stop, except for fuel. And, never thought anything of it.
Nope.
And now I can't even go the hour it is to Rose Town without my foot cramping
And you're
up.
complaining about it.
And, because it doesn't have cruise control.
I know.
I mean, I can appreciate some of that stuff. But so much of it is over the top and it's not needed.
Yeah.
And the more complicated we make these vehicles, the more they break down, the more problems we have with them.
The more expensive they are to fix.
The more expensive they are to fix.
And I feel like we're making worse drivers, not better drivers.
Oh,
a lot of this.
We're absolutely making worse drivers. And I know that because my truck's got a backup camera and backup beepers and things like that.
Yep.
And when I back my old cars up, I have to actually think about it.
Yeah.
Before I never used to. It was automatic to be looking in mirrors, looking over my shoulder, turning around, checking, am I too close, And I find I get into a vehicle that doesn't have a backup camera or something like that, and I tend to almost draw a blank for that split second.
Yeah.
I'm backing up, but I'm not looking where I'm going because I'm waiting to hear the beep. And I'm like, wait a minute, this car doesn't have that. Oh, I better stop and make sure I'm not running into anything. So, it is making worse drivers. It totally is. And, lane departure assist and things like that is making bad drivers.
Yeah.
People rely on that stuff way too much. And then if, you go to a shop that does work on your vehicle and doesn't recalibrate things correctly, and then you get in an accident purely because you're relying on a system that's not set properly, things like that. You get a crack in your windshield in the right place and then a sensor doesn't work right. Or, there's all those things. And it is making terrible drivers.
Here's my biggest beef. This is it right here. I think it's my biggest one. People driving without their headlights on. And here's why.
Man.
Here's why. Like it's the simplest explanation.
Yeah.
My old car, all the old cars that you've got,
Yeah.
when you get in the thing and you start it up, if it's dark out, you can't see nothing.
Exactly.
You see nothing on your dashboard.
Yeah.
Nothing is lit up anywhere. You got to pull that knob out or turn that switch.
Yeah.
And then oh yeah, now I have headlights and my
Yeah.
dashboard lights up, because if you don't,
Yeah.
you can't see a thing. You get into a modern car, your truck, my daily driver,
Yeah.
you start the thing up, practically the whole dashboard lights up.
Yeah,
Almost the
pretty
whole
much.
thing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, minus maybe some of the heater controls or some of the buttons, but even your screen
Yeah.
is on, right?
Yeah.
So you can see your radio.
Yeah, and all your gauges
And
are
all your
lit.
gauges are
Yeah.
lit up nicely. Sometimes too bright, but
Yeah.
lit up. And then the daytime running lights, as good as those things are to have, a lot of the new ones with LEDs are quite bright.
Yeah.
So they actually kind of do illuminate the road, say in the city,
Yeah.
pretty well.
Yeah.
And then people are driving around.
Yeah.
And you're giving them these dagger looks, and they have no idea what
Yeah.
they're doing wrong. There's no tail lights. It's the wrong headlights on. They're blinding people. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, come on.
I know, it drives me up the wall. That's one of my biggest things too. And it's funny because GM, again, I'm not trying not to be biased, but GM has had automatic headlights
Yeah.
since the 80s.
Yeah, I know.
The late 80s, you could buy a Pontiac Bonneville.
Yep.
That had automatic headlights. When it got dark out, they turned on.
Exactly.
And all your lights turned on like they're supposed to. Still daytime driving lights, but when it got dark enough, they turned on automatically. And I think sometimes some of the problem is some of these drivers have had cars that have had automatic lights.
Yep.
And then they buy a car that doesn't. Because Ford hadn't had it for years. And I see lots of mid-2000s Fords driving around with no headlights on.
And even if they did, a lot of those other vehicles, so non-GM vehicles, you could put it into auto, but you could also just shut it right off.
Yeah.
So there's new legislation. I think it started this year, 2021.
Yes, it did. Anything built newer now, I think all has to have.
Is two things. It's either fully automatic, that's not, and when I say not defeatable, I mean you can't leave it in the off position.
Yeah.
You can move it to off, but it's gonna pop back to auto. So the next time you start the car, it's gonna be automatic.
Yeah, my
headlights.
truck does that.
Right. Or no dashboard lights on if the headlights are off. They're going back to that. So you can manufacture a car two ways.
Yeah.
It's going to guarantee that you know that your headlights are not, the whole headlight system isn't turned on.
Yeah.
Because man, oh man, like I say, we're making dumber drivers than we are making smarter drivers with some of this stuff.
I don't know. Like, I drive in from out of town every day
Mm-hmm.
because I live outside the city, and I don't even know on like foggy days and on like when I'm driving in at like this time of year when it's still kind of almost dark, you probably should have your headlights on.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit of fog going on. And someone's driving in, and they've been driving on the highway, like they live further out than I do. They've been driving on the highway for 20 minutes already. They have no headlights on. So they can barely see where they're going, and you cannot see them from behind at all.
Nope.
And and you get up beside them, and like you say, you're like, hey, dummy,
Yeah.
your lights aren't on. And they give you the finger, like, screw you. And it's like, I'm just trying to help you out, like, turn your lights on. And one of the big problems with the headlights, like you say, that you can't, like, that are automatic, you can't turn them off. So you can't flash. Old days, if someone didn't have their headlights on, you didn't flash your brights.
No.
You turned your headlights all the way off and all the way on a couple times. Blink them.
Yeah.
And people would be like, oh, well, now you don't have that option.
No.
So now you actually have to flash them with your brights, and then they think then they're pissed off at you because you just blinded them.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Either from the behind or from the front.
So you can't do that. So how are you supposed to get their attention besides saying, like, waving at them and what do you do? Like I don't even know what the proper motion would be, because you can't like point down at the dash and go, hey, stupid, because they can probably see their dash.
Of course they can.
It's like an old car. Like, I've gotten up behind or beside somebody on Circle Drive, and they're driving with no headlights on in an old car.
Yeah.
And I just point at the dash. And when they look down, they go, oh, my dash lights aren't on. And then they turn their lights on.
Yep.
Because they realize that, oh, crap, I'm driving in the dark.
Can't see anything.
Yeah. But, on a new car, you don't even have that option, because they can probably see what they need to see.
We can solve all the world's problems, Darren.
Oh, we totally could. Yeah. Give me a car. I'll build one just like Homer Simpson. But,
glass domes and all.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. It's There's so many things I love about cars, and I love old cars.
Yeah.
And I like new cars too. I really do.
There's lots of neat stuff about
Yeah.
new cars. The amount of horsepower they can get out of a small engine now compared to what they could in the 80s
Unbelievable.
is amazing. I mean, who knows how long it will last in comparison? Like an old 2.5 liter 4-cylinder that you could get in like an old Chevy Cavalier or an old S10 truck. They were called iron horses for a reason because they went forever. They just run and run and run. Even when they were burning oil and making lots of noise, they'd still run. You take a 2-liter engine with a big turbo on it now that lots of companies are doing. They're putting turbos on all these little engines. Well, yeah, they make way more power. There's a longevity there. Who knows? Because if you watch racing and you watch guys that are putting big superchargers and turbos on engines and racing them, they don't last that long. So, you drive that car hard enough with this little turbo in it, you're going to blow it up. But I'm convinced that I was born in the wrong time. Like, I should have been a teenager in the 50s or 60s.
Hey, I'm with you.
I'm
right there with you.
I believe I was totally born in the wrong time because I'd give just about anything to have gotten to grow up at the time when the horsepower race was on and muscle cars became a thing.
And there wasn't a big workup over a lot of, I'll say emission stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big thing.
I'm all for protecting the environment.
Sure.
But you know what? You take an old classic car, that car probably in its whole life hasn't produced as much emissions as like a semi truck.
Yeah. That's
or
right.
a big diesel locomotive.
Yep.
That does in a year. Mm-hmm. Those, sure, they weren't as fuel efficient as cars are now, but you look at all the plastic and petroleum products in cars now, they're just as bad for the environment as the old cars. The old cars are probably better. And that old car's still driving around.
Yep.
This 2020 thing that someone just bought today will not be around in 50 years.
No.
It will not be here.
No.
It will be.
In fact, it'll be replaced 3 times over.
Likely.
So the question begs the question, all the resources it took to make those 3 new cars.
Yeah.
Does that equate to more emissions or more, let's call it environmental damage than just that 50-year-old car that's been chugging away?
Exactly.
And I don't know if we have the answer to that, but it sure begs the question, doesn't it?
And because they don't build cars to last anymore. Like there was a time, like you'll talk to anybody back that was, a young person back in the day when all those 60s cars were new, and they'll say, well, they didn't fit together nice, and they'd actually weren't that great of cars, and they had their problems too, and all that kind of thing, which I'm sure they did.
Yeah,
everything was built by hand and designed by people with no computers.
Yeah,
I mean, an engine was designed on a piece of paper and drawn out on blueprints, just like a car was. Everything now, in my opinion, should be lasting 10 times longer because everything is built on computer and it's built within tens of thousands of inches of engine specs are just amazing now.
Yep.
Like things are so tight that without the right oil, it does damage to the engine, not just any oil.
My car's run an OW20, full synthetic.
Yeah. And if you run
OW20.
1030 in your car, you'll damage the engine.
I'm sure I'd blow it up.
Because the engine the tolerances are so tight and everything that it'll damage the engine.
Exactly.
And cars should last 10 times longer now. With all the advancements we've made, they should be. I mean, I know there's no money in it for the car. It's cars.
I've had this discussion with lots of people. Designed obsolescence.
Yeah.
So you're totally right. They should last longer. And the second thing is we should actually be able to make them so easy to work on.
Yeah.
Because we have all this design technology at our fingertips. Yeah. But it's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
The cars from the 60s were simple, made to be repaired.
Yeah.
Now there's so many parts that are throwaway parts. I've got the shop manual for my Buick, and it tells you how to rewire the starter, like it shows you how to test spark plugs to reuse them. Who the hell reuses spark plugs?
Well,
I mean, that's just one little piece.
Yeah.
But it gives you instructions on how to test and rebuild every component on that car.
Yeah.
Not take it off, throw it out, and put a new one on.
Yeah. Which is the standard
Is the standard now. In fact, the standard now is that there's some stuff that can't even be replaced.
Like wheel bearings on a car is a perfect example. Wheel bearings I don't think there is one car on the road now that a wheel bearing is serviceable.
No.
It is a part that once it wears out, you take it off, you throw it away, you put in a new one. Mm-hmm. And supposedly they're supposed to be way better. But my 69 Cutlass has the same wheel bearings in it that it had in it in 1969 when it rolled off the assembly line. And I checked them and greased them every couple of years.
And put the right torque on the castle nut.
And it's still going.
Still going.
So, it's hard to say that they're better.
I know. I'm so right there with you with this stuff. It's, and I look at how serviceable some of that old stuff is. It was meant to come apart, go back together, not be broken. Even just the simple, all those plastic clips that we use in vehicles now, they're one-time use things.
Yeah.
Even if you pull them out gently and you don't think you broke them, they're never going to go back in as tight as they were the first time. They are throwaway items.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's one microscopic little clip.
Yeah, but you think about each car has 100 of them, and there's 1 million cars on the road.
That's a lot of
freaking little clips.
Yeah.
A lot of plastic.
Yeah. And then if it has to come apart, you have to replace all of those pieces. I mean,
I know.
I worked at a place. We had a van. I am going to pick on Chevy for this one. We had a Chevy Uplander van.
Yeah.
And it had it was still under warranty. Like, it was 2 years old. And we used to store some stuff in the glove box because it was a work van.
Yeah.
Open the glove box, close the glove box. Well, one day I'm driving. The whole lid falls right off into the floor. And I look, and the hinge, they didn't use a metal, like, it's a plastic lid and a plastic box.
Yeah.
But it's literally a piece of plastic that's got a score in it.
Yeah.
And that's the hinge.
Yeah.
So minus 35 rolls around, you open the glove box, enough flexes on that scored piece of plastic, it just simply shears off.
Yeah.
That's it. Falls off. So I'm like, well, we'll get a new hinge.
Yeah.
Like, no, you replace the entire assembly.
Yeah.
The interior part of the glove box, the lid, it's all comes as one thing.
Yeah.
They did it under warranty the first time. It broke a second time about 8 months later, or maybe just the following winter. It was like $400.
Yeah.
No. There was no lid on that glove box for the rest of the time that van existed because,
I know.
But why not just put the metal hinge you've been using, like we talked about, all those shareable parts that GM used for 100 years?
1 million years.
I'm sure it was the same hinge that GM used in my Buick as a 1990 whatever.
Well, yeah. I know.
Why'd you stop?
I know.
I don't get it.
Because it was cheaper by 3 cents a car.
Well, and that's big money, right? I get it.
I get it.
But it's so infuriating with that kind of stuff.
For people who, I know there's lots of people out there that a car is just a way for them to get from point A to point B. They could give a crap what it looks like, what color it is, how
it's a toaster.
You know what I mean?
Appliance.
Yeah, it could be nothing. You know how I feel about washer and dryer. As long as it washes my clothes and dries them, I don't really care what it looks like or what it does.
Yeah.
But for the part of the community that really cars are their thing, it is infuriating, and I know that it is, because you can go to any car show and talk to anybody that's got an old car about new cars, and they all say the same thing.
They're saying what we're saying right now.
Yeah, exactly.
They're telling stories about some new thing that fell apart and some old thing that has held together like for 50 years.
And it's like, why? Like a good example is paint.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all these brand new Chevy trucks are having paint problems, paint chipping off easily, no paint on them, and the paint's peeling and this and that. And while they had a big problem in the 90s, even Dodge had a big problem in the 90s with paint peeling right off, and Chevy had the same issue. But you can go find a 1950s Chevy in a barn somewhere that has had bird crap and dust and everything all over it. Pull it out of there, wash it, and polish it, and it'll look like the car's only 15 years old.
Yeah.
Like, I get that probably there's stuff in that paint that gives people cancer, but there's stuff in the new paint that gives people cancer too. So that is purely because back when they built those cars, they were built with pride.
Yeah,
they really were.
I think so.
They were built with the guys that worked in those factories. They got a smile on their face when that car rolled off the assembly line all done, and it was shiny blue or red or whatever color it was. And I painted that, and I've painted all these cars, and I painted half the cars in Michigan. Like there was some pride there. Now everything's computers and it's machines, and it's some guy sitting in an office somewhere going, well, if we cut back 1.3 liters on every vehicle of paint material, we're going to save blah, blah, blah $1 million over the course of this much time. And it will still last long enough to get off warranty.
To be past the corrosion warranty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because that's all they care about. And the unsuspecting people that buy end up getting a vehicle that they pay way too much money for. Mm-hmm. and doesn't last half the amount of time that it should.
And then in 10 years,
Yeah.
GM also decides that they're going to throw away all the parts for that car too.
Yep. Because why would you need them after 10 years?
No.
We don't want you driving that in 10 years. We want you driving a new vehicle.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. And for the people who are car people, like some people that buy a vehicle brand new and they drive it until it's done. Like however long that is. Might be 10 years, it might be 15, and they might drive it for the rest of their life.
done. Either they spend it out, or I consider myself a guy like I've got a 10-year-old Honda CRV.
Yeah.
And it shines just as good as it did when it was new.
Yeah.
Because why would I waste another $40,000 buying another vehicle that does the same thing that one does?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
keep going.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, I guess if it blows up or somebody schmucks it and it's written off, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But why replacing it for the sake of replacing it?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it might be different if one day you decide, you know what, I want to get a little bit bigger car, or or something like that.
Sure.
But yeah, to replace it just purely for the sake of, well, I think I haven't bought a car in 2 years. I'm just going to go buy a car. Just for the sake of that is just, I know. But some people are like that.
Yeah.
And for those people, like, you're only owning it for 2 years. You're owning it for the best part of its life anyway.
Yeah.
And then after that, what does it matter to you? Because you're just going to trade it off and get another new car.
Get a new car.
And then you have that one for 2 years and have the best part of its life, and then trade it off on another one.
But I mean, I totally believe that, now manufacturers want us to own it for 2 years. The next guy owns it for 2 years, 2 more years after that, and it's beat to hell, miled out.
Yeah.
Looks like crap, and it's going to the scrapyard.
Yeah. Well, and they don't make things to last longer than that anyway.
Yeah.
Like, by the time a vehicle's 6 to 8 years old, you've already probably been having transmission issues, or the engine's making noise that it shouldn't be making, or it's rusting somewhere where it's like, how is this thing could be rusting already? But it is. There's no longevity in anything anymore, so because they don't want it to have it.
So I guess what we're getting at is just drive old cars.
Yeah. You know what? If I didn't live in this province, I wouldn't drive a new vehicle.
Yeah?
I have my new truck because I need something that I know is going to start and have heat when it's minus 40 out.
Yes.
And I can't, I could probably make my Oldsmobile do that, but I can't do it to it. I cannot do that to that old car.
No.
I drove it through the first winter I was here, first 2 winters I was here. That was enough. It's too hard on it.
Yeah.
And I don't feel good about it. So, could I drive a really old beater all year round, in the wintertime? Yeah, sure, I probably could. But for me, I do road trips. I do things like that.
Yeah.
And I would much rather just have something that I just get in it and I do oil changes on it. And, I usually do all my own oil changes and servicing and things like that. But on my new truck, I don't.
Yeah.
I take it to the dealership because it's under warranty. So if something gets wrecked, it's their fault. It's under warranty. I don't have to think about it, because I would much rather spend my time thinking about my old cars and fixing my old cars or working on my old cars.
Yeah.
And not worry about this stupid new thing.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
I keep it clean and I keep it looking nice and everything, but really it's not my pride and joy. My pride and joys are my old cars, and I would much rather spend the time and the money and the effort to maintain those and let someone else maintain my new vehicle, because at some point that new vehicle is going to break or get written off.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have to get a different one anyway. My old cars won't change.
It makes you wonder, though, if what you just said, so take that whole example, and as time moves, will that Chevy that you're driving right now, that 2018 truck, is that going to be somebody's baby in 50 years? Like your Oldsmobile is.
Yeah.
It's 50 years old, right?
I don't think that. I honestly don't believe, and I know some people say, well, this young crowd now, their cars will be Civics, SIs will be their classics, and because that's the generation they're in, and when that car is 50 years old, it'll be like, well, that's a classic car because that when I was growing up, that was the car that all the kids at school had. But I don't think that's the case, because most of those cars aren't even going to be on the road by that time. A brand new car you buy today will not be on the road in 50 years. There just won't be around because they don't build them long enough to last.
Not built to last that long.
And when it costs you, like right now, if I wanted to get the transmission rebuilt in my Oldsmobile, I know exactly how much it would cost because I just had to do it with the wife's car. It was $1,000.
Yeah.
But that was rebuilt and upgraded and brand new, everything inside, and it's going to last 1,000,000 years now because it's 10 times the transmission it ever was when it was new.
Mm-hmm.
To get the transmission rebuilt on my new truck would be a minimum bill of about $5,000.
Yeah.
Well, when that truck is 20 years old, no one is going to spend $5,000 on a truck that's only worth $5,000 to have the transmission rebuilt.
No.
And it'll likely have been rebuilt twice already by that time. So, you know, like that, nobody's going to spend the money on them. The more and more of this new stuff will just go to recycle.
Yeah,
It'll
I
get
think
parted out, recycled, and there'll be the odd one around that some elderly guy bought brand new that is one of those people that drives it only twice a week to the store. It's got low miles, and then he passed away and gave it to his grandson, and because it was Grandpa's truck, it's his pride and joy, and he drives it very little and maintains it and keeps it really nice. There'll be those around.
Yeah.
But as a whole, there just won't be. You won't see them.
And you can start to see it already. And I think too that there was a big, we have a lot of, it seems like there's still lots of old 50s and 60s cars kicking around because a lot of time, they were especially in Saskatchewan on the farm, they stopped using it to push into the bush.
Yeah.
It sits there, but the metal's so thick that it's still sitting there.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Whereas, when you see a car that's from the 80s or 90s now today,
Yeah.
they rusted out. They rusted to nothing.
Yeah.
Like I mean, disintegrated.
Well,
there's no metal left. It's just crumbles.
When was the last time you saw an 80s Datsun truck anywhere?
Yeah.
There's a reason why there's none of them around. It's because they were rusting on the lot. I was convinced that if you bought one brand new and you drove it long enough, there'd be nothing left of it but a frame and a steering wheel.
Yeah.
And you'd still be driving it because the engines were awesome. They run forever.
Sure.
But you'd be sitting on a seat with a frame with nothing else around you because that's all that's left of that truck.
I've talked about it in other podcasts, but my first car was an 81 Honda Civic. It was my grandfather's. And if I could honestly, in that same regard, we were talking about first thing in the podcast, if I had $1 million right now, I'd go find one, have it restored exactly the way I had it when I was 16. But even by the time I was 16, there was holes through the floor.
Yeah.
I went and got parts off of one in a junkyard over by Martinsville when I was 17, whatever.
Yeah.
I think I need a new trunk lid because mine was so full of Swiss cheese full of holes. The back window was hardly held in by anything. I went and found one off of a car, but the car next to it, the other Civic sitting next to it, I looked in it just for fun.
Yeah.
And I peeled the carpet back. Actually, I don't think there was carpet. It was just kind of taken out. There was a stop sign for a floor.
Yeah.
And the passenger seat was bolted to 2 hockey sticks shoved through the frame rails. There was nothing left. And I mean, this is like, I'm talking, this is 20 years ago already, right? Like, this is so far long ago. I would love, and I'm kind of on the hunt to find one of these cars, but I can't find one.
Because there isn't any.
I can't find one. But you know what? That car, when we sold it for $800, it sold in 10 minutes on Kijiji, sight unseen in 2008.
Yeah.
It ran so well. The engine was so good in it. It just, but literally coming apart, just disintegrating.
Yeah.
And I mean, things have gotten a lot better, let's say with those, Japanese brands. Now you got cars that are lasting a lot longer than 20 years because they did some rust proofing and stuff like that, right? But on the whole, if you go look for a Toyota whatever, a Honda whatever, a Mazda whatever from mid-90s, you're going to have you're not going to find a lot of them.
No. But
you're not going to find a lot of anything from the 1990s.
Even American-made cars. Go find a late 80s, early 90s Cavalier. I know they were a cheap car and they weren't worth a lot of money or anything, but go find one.
No,
they're just gone.
No, they're gone.
And that's what these new cars are going to be. They're just going to be gone.
Yeah.
I had a Civic once too.
Yeah.
I did have one. It was never a on-the-road vehicle. I bought it for $50. And it was my dune buggy.
Oh, cool.
And me and my buddy were out cruising on a logging road out in BC one time, and we were like, well, let's go down this road, which no one had been down this road in this is not a road you take a 4x4 on, let alone this little Honda Civic. If we got stuck, we got stuck. We didn't care. We'd walk back to town. So I went down, and we're going on this road that's got heaves in it and everything, and my buddy's like, what, the seat feels weird. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, it's like moving. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And the floor was being held together by the carpet, and I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
And the seat was, the rocks and the things we were driving over were pushing on the floor, and the seat was moving and rocking because it was nothing, there was nothing holding it in the car. And he was like, I really feel, you know, that meme that's out there where it shows Ralph sitting in the school bus and there's no floor, and he's like, I'm in danger. That was like, you feel that way, right? Oh, that car was just like it ran like a top.
Yeah, perfect.
But there was nothing below the door sills down was gone on that car. And this was a 81, 82.
That's my car.
And
it was an 81.
And this was in like 1990, like would have been about 1997, 98.
So it was 17 or 18 years old.
It wasn't 20 years old yet.
My grandfather's got a 98 Honda Accord right now.
Yeah.
With 280,000 kilometers that doesn't burn a drop of oil.
Yeah.
That's never had, it's literally had like brake jobs.
Yeah.
It's running on its original struts, its original driving, like its steering components are original.
Yeah.
Perfect. One little spot of rust in the back corner fender, but like, I mean, on the whole though, it's like a solid car.
Yeah.
Totally. And now it's 20 whatever years old, 23, right? So they made some huge changes. But the point is though,
go find another one of those though.
That's the thing. Go find another one. That's the thing. You know,
that's the thing.
He took really good, amazing care of it, right? Totally. But these cars just aren't being saved. They're being used up, and they're not being pushed into a bush. They're being taken to the scrapyard. I mean, crushed, and that's it.
If you push them in the bush, they return to the earth from which they came.
Exactly.
Because, I know, I've gone to farmyards where there's cars from the 80s and 90s, and there's nothing left of them just sitting in the yard. They just literally going right into the ground.
The paint stands up, but there's no metal behind the paint. Like
nothing. It's just unreal. Like you close the door and the door falls off almost because there's nothing.
It falls in.
On.
It caves in.
Yeah,
I know. So like, it's sad. It worries me a little bit because, right now, the car world is sort of centered around 50s, but especially 60s now, right? Like most of the people who have got the money to have that classic car when they were a kid, they got the money to restore it, they got the money to, drive it around. It's still, cars of an era where it was solid built, thick steel, so there's something left to fix.
Yeah.
But another 20, 30 years, it's going to be people who were grew up, in the 90s. Those cars are gone.
Yeah.
And they're half made of plastic. So the problem is you break a bumper. Yeah. Well, if nobody's producing a new bumper for, pick a car. I don't know.
Let's pick something that would be really obscure. Like a 1990 Chevy Beretta Z20. What were they? A Z24?
Z24?
No, Z24 was a Cavalier.
Yeah,
Z20. Was it Z22 or something like that?
But I know what you're talking about.
But it was a little, the little 4-cylinder 5-speed. But they were a weird car. They only built them for a couple of years.
Yep.
But first of all, I haven't seen one in probably 10, 15 years. Yeah. And I had a buddy that had one. That's the only reason I even know a Beretta even existed, really. Yeah. But if you were to try to, say you found one in 20 years
and restore it,
you'll never restore it.
No,
because you'll never get parts for it.
It won't exist.
Yeah.
Even just mechanical parts won't be around.
Well, exactly.
Because there's nothing new that shares anything from them.
No.
Right? It's all
you'll
been
never
changed.
Find a ball joint. You'll never find a tie rod end. You'll never find that stuff.
No, it won't exist. And then even worse, you're trying to find body panels, or you're trying to find bumper covers, or any of that.
Or a headlight. Say you need a headlight.
Yeah.
Good luck finding a headlight.
And let's just be honest. Any interior from any car in the 1980s and 90s, the plastic was garbage.
Oh, it was terrible.
It could disintegrate around you, right?
Yeah, they were
terrible. I mean, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. So it's all going to be broken inside, and there'll be nowhere to get a part or a piece for it.
Yeah. And the auto wreckers won't have them either because they don't keep that stuff.
They don't save stuff.
They don't state that, a lot of auto wreckers don't save anything over 15, 20 years old now already.
And even if they do have something now, it lasts the shelf life of that car in the auto wrecker is a span of a few months
usually,
right? So it arrives, people pick parts, it sits around for a few months, and then it gets crushed. So we only have cars in the auto wreckers right now from 15-ish 18 20 years ago. Well, it just keeps moving up and up and up and up and up. And 5 years goes by, and everything's off the road. Everything's been crushed. Everything's been gone through. You can't, like, if you own a Cavalier now, you really can't go to an auto wrecker and find parts for
They're
it.
very difficult to find now. I know I gave my kid one when he turned 16. I got one for $500. Really good deal. It was a good car. But it needed a strut.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if this thing even makes it 6 months before he smashes it up, I said that I'll feel pretty good. So I thought, you know what? I'm not going to go buy a brand new strut and put a brand new strut on one side of this car because it's going to sit stupid and it's not going to drive right because it's going to have one brand new strut and one worn out one. So I went to the auto wrecker and I did find one Cavalier in the auto wrecker that I went to, and he had 500 cars.
Yeah.
And there was one Cavalier and he had one good strut.
That's right.
I got lucky.
Totally.
But, it's not going to be the case in very short time.
No.
And then you're right, because as the cars get newer, the older cars disappear. And you can go to some auto wreckers and they'll still have 50s and 60s cars in their yard.
Yes.
And they won't have any 80s cars.
No.
None.
No, because and the thing is, when it's just a succession,
Yeah.
All the cars, like I take that 81 Civic of mine, right?
Yeah.
I used to, when I was 16, go get parts from other ones in the wrecker, right? But as just time moves on, okay, they all are off the road now because they're all either rusted out and not safe or worn out and they're gone, right?
Yeah.
They're just not drivable anymore. So they all end up in the wrecker, probably about the time when I had mine that I was scavenging parts from other ones.
Yeah.
And then they go through the crusher. And there's none left in the auto wrecker, and there's none left on the road.
Yeah.
So you find one in some old lady's garage, with crap all over it, and it's like a unicorn.
Yeah.
It's just a miracle it even exists. What do you do? I was looking for my classic car, my Buick. I was considering finding one of these Civics. I was like, I'll go to California because they're still kind of around there, and there's still some in BC, kind of.
You can find them. BC, the biggest issue is if it's on the coast.
Yeah.
And it's usually rusty.
But there's some interior BC that are like, they're still hidden, squirreled away, especially down in California. They're still kind of following for these things. And then I thought to myself, but something breaks. Where do I get a part for it?
Yeah.
Or if I get it and it's not complete,
where
do I get a part for it?
Your 1981 Civic, you're worried about getting parts for it, but then you buy your old Buick and you're not really too worried about getting parts for it.
I mean, it's got its
There'll be some
limitations.
things.
Like some things. Interior bits and pieces and trim things, those are harder to find.
Yeah.
But like mechanical stuff's
going to be, and again, one of the things I liked about GM was it shares a lot of things with a Pontiac and a Chevy, and it does share some things.
Not everything, but a lot. Yeah,
but
that's right.
So there's a bigger market there for sure for them to still build parts.
Sad though.
It is.
Because we're going to kind of end up with sort of this, what kind of feels like the end of that car community. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we're wrong. But
yeah, like I don't, there's not a lot of cars in the 80s and 90s that were really cool cars. I can name a handful that were kind of neat. It wasn't a good time for cars. For the automobile in general.
No.
Everyone was just trying to make things that were cheap and cost effective, and I don't want to say good on fuel because fuel mileage wasn't really great in the 80s and 90s. They just kept making engines smaller to try to make them better on fuel, which didn't fix the fuel problem. Like you take a perfect example is like a Corvette, actually.
Yeah.
Even though it's not a day-to-day car, but like in the late 60s, early 70s, they were coming with big block engines and high horsepower and everything.
High compression. Yep.
Yeah, and by the end of the 70s and into the early 80s, the car looks almost the same, but it has 120 horsepower. And because that was their answer for fuel mileage and emissions.
Yep.
When it probably put out just as much if you really looked at the numbers and really tested it the way you should as that car that was 10 years previous with the bigger motor and more horsepower, because that bigger engine didn't have to work nearly as hard to lug that car around as that underpowered engine does. And that's a common thread that you see a lot. Yep. I had a Chevy Trailblazer with an inline cylinder, which was the standard engine in those things. I had a couple of them. They got horrible mileage because they were way underpowered for the weight of the vehicle.
Yeah,
if they'd have put a small V8 in that thing, which they did in the later years, I know a couple people that have them. They get better mileage than the smaller inline six engine.
I always wondered that too. And a perfect example is Volkswagen. Remember Dieselgate that happened, right?
Yeah.
So they had all these diesels. We all know, we've heard the stories. Somebody would fill up a tank of diesel in a Volkswagen Jetta. They'd drive from here to Vancouver.
Yeah.
From Saskatoon to Vancouver. And they'd go the whole way on one flippin' tank of diesel through the mountains and everything.
Yeah.
Then the update came out for these diesels.
Yeah.
And either you like got the thing updated or you it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Guys would go get their Volkswagen diesels updated and it would go half the distance.
Yeah.
So, okay, it didn't make any sense though. So now you're doubling the fuel required, but it's better for the environment. So it's, there's more emission controls, but you're literally doubling the amount of fuel you have to use to go the same distance. How can that be better for the environment?
Exactly, because it's not. But what happened is somebody in some petroleum office somewhere went, "Did you hear about Joe? He just drove his Volkswagen all the way to Vancouver Island from Saskatchewan, or pick a destination.
Yeah,
he drove 1,000 kilometers, 2,000 kilometers on a tank of fuel in his Jetta.
Yeah,
we got to get a hold of VW right now." And they did.
Yeah.
And they said, "You can't do that. We're going to pay you X amount of money to do this update to make your vehicle harder on fuel because you can't build a car that's that good on fuel." Because then first of all, no one's going to buy any other kind of car if that's the only one that gets that kind of mileage.
Yeah.
And
we're not going to sell any diesel.
Yeah, we're never going to sell any diesel. So because everyone's going to buy diesels, and then we're never going to sell anything else or any diesel. So we need to stop this right now. And that's exactly what happens with that kind of stuff. Remember when the Equinox, when the Chevy Equinox was redesigned and it came out in like 2010, 11, it boasted 1,000 kilometers to a tank of fuel. That was the big thing, was 1,000 or 1,100 kilometers to a tank of fuel. It was some ridiculous number for a vehicle of that size, like for this like this small size SUV. I know someone who bought one purely because of that. Oh yeah, it's supposed to get this ridiculous mileage. I don't think they ever got 400 kilometers to a tank of fuel.
I was going to say, I worked at a place that had a couple of those. Yeah. They were crap on gas.
Yeah, my wife has a Terrain, which is GMC Terrain, which is the same vehicle. She gets my half-ton Chevy truck with the big 6.2 liter V8 engine gets better mileage than her Terrain. And yeah, he buys this thing and he had it to the dealership. They changed engines. They did all sorts of things to this thing. It never got better than like 450 to a tank of fuel. He was livid. He says, "I will never buy another GM again." I says, that was propaganda bull.
Yeah.
He says it wouldn't have got that kind of mileage downhill with a tailwind for 3 days. It wouldn't have got that kind of mileage. Like there was just no way it was going to get 1,000 kilometers to a tank of fuel. Even if the tank was double the size, it wouldn't even have got that. No. But again, like my wife's car, when we test drove it, hers has the V6 in it.
Yeah.
We test drove some 4-cylinder ones. Well, the 4-cylinder ones were rated to get basically the same mileage.
Yeah.
And they have no power.
I know.
Well, that's why they don't get any mileage. The thing works so hard all the time to lug the car around.
And that's, I've had this conversation with a lot of people too. It's kind of sickening with new cars. It's the weight of things. And, it's not about having a horsepower war.
No.
They can take a motorcycle. I got an uncle who's big into bikes, owns a shop in Moose Jaw. They can take a motorcycle and they can pare down every little piece on it, gram by gram, to reduce the weight, to increase that power to weight ratio.
Yeah.
So instead of just making it more powerful, just cut the friggin' weight out of it, do some engineering, and you got a V6 that one in your wife's has got like 295 horsepower, something ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't even think it's not even that much.
Maybe it's 270. That's a lot of power though. 270 horsepower is plenty of power.
Yeah.
If you could lose 1,000 pounds, you'd have a real mover.
Well, like those Chevy Trailblazers, like the one that I had, that's a full frame vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
It was heavy. It weighed 4,000 pounds or some ridiculous thing. It had 270 horsepower with that inline six, but 270 horsepower wasn't and the torque I think was very comparable.
Yeah.
But it weighs 4,000 pounds. It's just too much for that engine. Like a half-ton truck in the 60s that had an inline six that only would have had 200 horsepower, maybe. Like that's probably even being a little bit generous. But that truck only weighed 4,000 pounds.
Well, or less. Or
less.
even less.
Yeah.
Or even
But
less.
here you got this smaller SUV with this big full frame underneath it. And, it's just a heavy vehicle all around. Lots of glass in it, all that kind of thing. They make the vehicle so heavy that the poor engine just struggles to move it anywhere.
I know. If they cut some weight, honestly, you could take all these cars that make...
Well, where's half the weight come from? How much wire is in a car now?
Yeah.
You can go around the earth and back to the sun 3 times with some of the wire that's in some of these cars.
Yep.
Like it's just it's unreal how much is in miles and miles and miles and miles of wire in one car. So I mean, there's lots of weight there. It doesn't feel like weight when you're holding the wire by itself.
No.
But it's a lot of wire.
It's a lot of weight in the wiring.
Yeah.
My old Buick doesn't even have power windows or power locks. There isn't even one of those little rubber boots in between the door and the frame. There's nothing. The door's empty.
Yeah.
It's got a window winder, like a crank,
Yeah.
a piece of glass, and a door cover.
What size engine's in your car?
430.
430. That's a fairly, in its day, that's a big
It's
engine.
a big block, yeah.
That's a big engine.
Yeah.
But that car, you cruise that car down the highway, it probably gets really good mileage for a car of that size of that age.
It does.
Like compared to other cars of the era.
Yeah. I can squeak out like 18 or 20 miles to the gallon.
And that's amazing when you think about a truck of the same age would have been getting 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you take a smaller car, like so take my Oldsmobile Cutlass for example.
Yep.
That's a smaller car around the same area as your car.
Yep.
I can get about 18.
Yep.
But it has really tall gear. Mm-hmm. So it revs really low on the highway. But if you had a Chevelle or GTO that has way different gear, you're not even coming close to that.
No.
And it's all, like, the car is virtually the same car.
That's right. I laugh because people always look at my car. It's 20 feet long and it's big and huge.
They expect it to be a gas guzzler.
And they expected, that must weigh a shitload.
Yeah.
Well, it's not light.
Well,
like
it's a big
it
car.
weighs 4,700 pounds.
Yeah.
But, okay, my mother-in-law has a Ford Taurus, a 2011,
Yeah.
all-wheel drive, massaging seats, heated rear seats. I mean, it's a luxury liner, but it looks smaller than my big Buick.
Yeah.
It weighs 5,500 pounds.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, what I'm saying is...
And it has a much smaller engine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, you'd think they would have worked on getting these things lighter, but actually they've really just gotten heavier.
Yeah.
They really have just gotten heavier. Yeah, my car is not light, but if you compare it to a new car, like, holy crap, it's lighter than some of these.
Unreal.
But
How heavy they are.
But it's empty. If you think about it, the back end of my car it's like it's a frame and there's some fenders and there's nothing else in it. There's a little bit of wire that go to the brake lights and that's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing in it. So
I know
everything is so packed now.
Yeah. Well, and I know there's lots of stuff in new cars. There's lots of safety stuff.
Yeah.
Like airbags, all that stuff always has weight to it.
got weight.
And I get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like, and they could do a lot, like, by just changing the way they build cars. Mm-hmm. Well, that would save tons
Tons of weight.
of weight.
Cut down on some weight, and you'd have rockets, with the power we've got, and you'd actually get the fuel economy numbers they want to get, right?
Well, that's the thing. Like, now their big thing is well, we'll get fuel mileage. We're going to make a transmission have 19,000 speeds.
Yeah.
19,000 gears. Like, all they do is set that thing up for failure because all these new transmissions, all the big automakers are having huge transmission problems. You have a transmission that's shifting and shifting and shifting and shifting
All the
and
time.
shifting and shifting and shifting and shifting constantly. Mm-hmm. Like, transmissions only, when the transmission's built in the factory, it has X number of shifts in it, right from factory. And no transmission's the same. And it can be any number. It could be 5. It could be 5 million.
Yep.
But everyone has, and so every time it shifts, that's one tick.
It loses one.
One.
Yeah.
One down, one down, one. So you get a transmission that has 10 speeds and it's shifting and shifting and shifting over and over again. And like we on the prairies here, we don't even have big steep hills like they do in lots of places. Like where I grew up, the one town I lived in for a while was called Ladysmith. It's built on the side of a hill. And the hill is not a small hill. It's a hill that when it snows, there's only one way to get to the top. There's like 10 streets that go up that hill, but there's only one street that you can use to get to the top. Because once it snows, you're not going up any of those other ones. They're way too steep. So you think about other places
I know.
like than here with the hills and the ravines and all these other little things. Shifting and shifting and shifting. Transmission wears itself out so fast.
And you throw it in a truck and you're towing something with it.
Well, exactly.
And that's even harder on it when while it's doing that shifting action, right? So it's back to the set up to fail, you know, and not meant to last. Really,
exactly.
Buy a new one.
And I mean,
4 years.
Okay, I get it. The 10 speeds supposedly uses the power from the engine more efficiently. Well, then why isn't it getting 35 miles to the gallon?
Aha, see?
But it's not. Oh, wait a minute. Why isn't it?
Why isn't it?
Yeah. Why is my 1969 Oldsmobile Cutlass with an automatic 3-speed transmission, and my car weighs probably, it'll be lighter than my truck, but it's probably about 3,000 pounds probably.
Yeah, maybe 35, whatever.
Yeah, 35. So, I mean, it's a pretty heavy car, but why is my car getting 18 miles per gallon on the highway and my truck only getting 15? And it's 50 years newer.
Right.
Like what are we doing wrong? We're doing something wrong.
I think there's more to the story than just doing something wrong. I think there's more, there's got to be more factors at play. Like you said, the diesel company, the gasoline companies, they're all involved, right?
I know that, like, I was reading somewhere too. I was reading in, I can't remember, it was an auto magazine, and they were talking about that car manufacturers are required to have cars get a certain amount of mileage. Like they have a mandate.
And their fleet has to meet the numbers.
Yeah, their fleet has to meet it. But all they really need to do is have one in that fleet or two in that fleet that fall within what they need.
Yeah.
And the rest could kind of be elsewhere. So they'll make a Chevy Spark that gets 35 miles per gallon.
Their Bolt, that hybrid thing.
Yeah, and then they get their Bolt that does the hybrid, and so that takes their numbers, their average, and puts the average where it needs to be.
Up,
instead of, but they don't sell nearly as many of those. They sell all the other things that are really hard on fuel.
It answers the question why the hell they built an electric car and called it a Mustang, Ford, right? I mean, everybody's scratching their head. It should be called a Ford Galaxy. It's an electric car. Like, why would you ruin that name? But my point is, though, that gets, like, it's zero fuel, right?
Yeah.
It's electricity. So it skyrockets the average.
Yeah.
Because what is the number one vehicle sold around the world, North America? It's the Ford F-150.
Yeah.
It is the number one selling vehicle on the planet.
Yeah.
Bar none. And there's going to be an electric F-150, right? So those things, like, help the numbers because they have to change the average because it's all F-150s that they're selling, right? And they're all, most guys are still buying V8s. They're still putting 5-liter V8s into them. They're not ordering them with the, the double twin charged V6.
Yeah. Well, and again, what's the longevity on that engine?
Yeah. Well, we don't know. But we know a 5-liter V8 is going to go a long time. Yeah. Right?
Well, I mean, they've been building 5-liter, they've been building V8s for years.
Yeah.
And but again, they went from being very simple engine that was reasonably reliable.
Yeah.
All these new engines they're building, the reliability should be through the roof, and it's not.
I know.
They make them so complicated with so much other crap going on inside them. It doesn't need to be there. It's not helping the fuel mileage that much.
Nope.
They could do a lot more with really good computer programming and
cutting weight.
They've already cut weight. Like the engines are mostly aluminum now. Like that's a huge cut in the weight. But so why isn't this truck getting 35 miles per gallon? It should be. Every half-ton truck out there gas-powered truck should be able to get 35 miles per gallon. There's really no reason why it shouldn't.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to have a 20-speed transmission to do it. But they just, they just build things the way they build things for a reason. So,
what we're getting at is go buy an old truck.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, go buy an old car.
Yeah.
Because they had this crap figured out a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, they figured out, like, the only reason why an older car with 400 horsepower didn't get good mileage just because the guy couldn't keep his foot out of the throttle. It wasn't because he liked how it sounded when he went under the underpass. Like it's not because it wasn't capable. It was quite capable. If you did the right gear ratios and things like that, you could get mileage out of old cars.
Yeah, I know.
For sure you could.
They totally could.
Yeah.
They totally could. So go buy an old car and save the old cars and
Yeah. You want to save the environment? Buy an old car.
Yeah.
Like, really, you really think about it? You want to save the environment? Buy an older car. Don't buy a brand new car. Like,
Yep.
Really.
I know. Because its lifespan is going to go on a long time.
Yeah.
It's paid for its, sins, could call it that way,
Yeah.
a long time ago.
Well, there's a lot less petroleum products in an old car than there is in a new one.
Sure is.
So if you want to save the environment and you don't want to build a pipeline and you don't want to do all that crap, well, don't build a pipeline. It's bad for the environment, and we got to stop digging in the oil sands because it's bad for the environment. Well, you better go buy an old car, because an old car has virtually no petroleum products in it.
That's right.
The interior was fabric, cardboard,
Metal,
glass. New cars are plastic and plastic and plastic and plastic.
I know.
And what is plastic made out of?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, thanks for joining me, Darren. This has been a lot of fun. I love it. We've just kind of been all over the place, but thanks for telling your story about where you came from and everything like that.
Yeah.
So,
that's awesome.
I
I
had a
hope we
blast.
can do it again.
You bet. And thank you for listening to Bald Tires, a proud member of the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. Join us as often as we can. We try to get a new podcast every week, and we'll be back again then. Thanks for listening to Bald Tires, because when you make great memories, you make bald tires.